Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Really happy to be here and just sharing a few minutes with you guys. Couple different ground rules, and we were chatting about this right beforehand. I love that he mentioned content versus context, right? So as I go through a bit of the story, I have some principles that I want to share with you guys in terms of just building a successful business, building a successful personal brand. Always think about, does this relate to my story, and what can I take from this that I can apply in my life today, right? And you might not have the same story as I do, but anytime you see any speaker up here, you always want to think about what's the content versus the context, and the context is you, right? So that's rule number one. And then ground rule number two is really, I'm a big person on energy. You guys can probably tell, right? So as we do these rhetorical questions, feel free to yell back answers at me. We're going to do a bit of Q&A right at the end. I want to make this as relevant for you guys as possible so that it's going to be an impactful half an hour, however long it goes for. Does that sound fair for you guys? Yeah. Come on, you guys can do better than that. Does that sound cool to you guys? Yeah. Okay, wow. Okay, now you guys are amped up. So let me get a show of hands. I just want to see who's in the room. Is anybody a consistent creator? Meaning, do you have a blog, a YouTube channel, podcast, you do Instagram stories, Snapchat, you consistently publish something? Anybody? A couple of you? Let me ask you this. Does anybody here, have you ever had that moment in your life where you didn't want to maybe raise your hand, you wanted to say something but you didn't? Right? Or you wanted to create something, but you didn't press publish. You wanted to text someone, but then you didn't send the text. Anybody have that moment? Yeah, I figured as much. I've been there as well. And I think everybody has actually been there. And today, we're going to talk about something that I call a Changemaker moment, a moment that's going to help. We're going to talk about how you can eliminate all that hesitation, all those fears and limiting beliefs. We're going to talk about how you can actually eliminate that from your entire system so that you can make decisions with certainty and that you guys can actually operate and be the best version of yourself. So normally I get asked to speak at online marketing conferences or podcasting conferences, and really it's to help small, medium business owners actually launch podcasts and put a voice kind of behind their products and services. Or it's really in helping entrepreneurs, monetize, their work. But today, like I said, it's a really special topic because it's something I don't really talk about very often, but I think it's going to be really relevant for you guys to help you overcome any type of resistance, fear, limiting beliefs, anything that you feel that is not allowing you to raise your hand, not to go all in. We're going to talk about how you can eliminate that permanently. Does that sound fair? Yeah. All right. So, I think when I talk about Changemaker moments, so much of our lives is built up of moments. Would you guys not agree? It's moments that constantly define us. They say life is not about accumulating things, it's about accumulating the moments, right? It seems like everybody wants a private jet and to be on a yacht, but people don't actually want those things, right? They want the experience of those things, right? You want to be on those things with your family, your friends, maybe you do the Instagram, right? And you want to be able to share that experience with people. So one of my kind of Changemaker moments that happened for me was when I was 16 years old. Anybody 16 in here, out of curiosity? A couple of you, right? I know a few of you are a little older. So maybe you guys will resonate this, but when I was 16, I was in the back of this restaurant, and I was kind of huddled around with my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and we're just profusely crying, and we didn't know what to do. We were so in fear, we were freaking out, and what was happening was that we just found out that we were going to lose the restaurant. We were going to lose the entire business, and this is something that my family has worked, spent their whole lives working. And I don't know if for some of you it might resonate, but my parents are the type of parents that they would sacrifice everything for their children. And in their late 20s, I don't even know how they did it, but in their late 20s, they were able to uproot their entire life and move over here to Canada, all for the hope of better opportunities for their children. And when we were 10 years old, even though I was born in Canada, they did it again. And this time, we moved over to the US. And now, you got to keep in mind, this is like over a decade ago, so the US was a little different. was a little less kind of crazy with everything that's going on, less of a different president. And my parents wanted to go there, and they just wanted to provide their children, I think, as any good parents want to do, with great opportunities for them to succeed. And my parents opened up this restaurant, and I just remember the setting of being at this restaurant. They were constantly fighting. It was always about money. It was always about cash flow. It was never enough. And later, they found out that they were going to run out of cash, and that we were going to have to close down the restaurant. Later on, we found out that they were going to actually they will declare bankruptcy because of this. And I think at the time, I think when you're 15, 16, you don't really understand like cash flow issues. You don't really understand like what's actually happening behind the scenes of a business. And in fact, I was a pretty big like just troublemaker. I was like a total shit disturber. Like I was like absolutely going crazy. I wasn't there. I was at the restaurant, but I wasn't there by choice. Like I didn't choose to be there, right? Because I was 16. I just wanted to go hang out with my friends. I wanted to go and fit in. I wanted to go and be cool. I wanted to go and party, whatever that meant, at 16 years old. And because of the intelligent decisions I was making at 16 years old, I was, at one point, a couple months before this, I got arrested for vandalism and theft, just like a really, really stupid thing. And I just remember coming out, and my parents were so disappointed. All their energy and sacrifice in building a better life, and here we were at the police station at 6 a.m. And so for punishment, they actually brought me into the restaurant. The restaurant was in La Plata, Maryland, okay? We were living in Maryland at the time. It was about an hour and a half away from where we lived. So the commitment to go there every single day, you're committing 2.5 hours to 3 hours in the car, right? To go there, to come back. And I would just hate it. I remember like resenting my parents a little bit for bringing me into their business, because I wanted to go. It was like summer. It was like kind of exactly the same timeline, like end of July, beginning of August, right? Like I only had a few more weeks before I can go back to school. And so I really wanted to, I really didn't like being there, but I remember at that moment, my mom, who was sitting kind of in one of the back corners, and she's just crying, and it's kind of weird, like you never know what to say when someone's just like breaking down in front of you. And I remember I sat next to her, and obviously I felt really bad, but I felt like I had no control. I felt like I didn't have any power in this. And somewhere between her crying and then her going to sleep, I made a decision in my mind. It was a changemaker moment for me where I decided that I wasn't going to stop, and I wasn't going to stop doing the things that I was going to actually start living up to my own potential of myself. I was going to start actually applying myself, whether it was as a school or as an athlete, and I was going to actually actually maybe do something worthwhile, so to prove to my parents that they didn't waste all that energy, all that time in investing into someone that's a nobody, that goes and gets arrested. That's a complete loser. I don't know if any one of you guys resonate with this, but for me, that was a really big moment. And I remember the next few weeks later, when I was back at school, I was a completely different person. The way I would look at teachers and the way I would be present with people was completely different. It was just a switch in my eyes. And I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. I didn't know what my passion was. I didn't have a vision board. I didn't have any personal development guidebook, books, anything like that. I just knew that I could be a lot better version of myself if I'm just willing to try. And at the time, I was averaging like a C+, and I just really didn't care, didn't try. I remember my guidance counselor at the time was saying, I'd be lucky to get into a community college. I remember that's what she told me. And I'll never forget the moment. I was trying myself like the whole year. I was applying myself in all these classes. And one day, I walked by in the hallway, and I saw this little poster kind of on the side. And it was the year of kind of like saying yes to all these things. So I was saying yes to like opportunities. I was saying yes to being in advanced placement classes. I was saying yes to doing examinations for college credits. Like I was saying yes to a bunch of things. And on the poster, it said, we are going to do a competition to see who is going to speak at the high school graduation. And so if you are a senior, I was going to school in the US, And so they have like, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. And so if senior, last year in high school, if you're 16, 17 years old, you can qualify if you're graduating this year. All you got to do is you got to create a speech and you got to try out. And I don't know what it was about that poster, but I decided that I wanted to try out. No experience speaking, didn't know if I was going to be good. Spent my whole life thinking that I'm really okay at a lot of things, but never great at any one thing. And the reason they did this is because the school I was going to was like a super like magnet school. It had this thing in high school called International Baccalaureate. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's called IB. And so usually, like the valedictorian, the speaker spot goes to like the top-ranked students. But they couldn't do that in this case because the first 100, 150 spots would be all these wildly gifted, academically gifted students. And so they had this open competition. And I remember looking at the lists, and I remember, we're signing up for the times. And there's this thing that we learned in AP psychology. And it was this thing called halo effect. And the halo effect means that if you're really good before someone, you make the next person kind of look bad because they're comparing you directly, right? Conversely, if you're really bad, the next person looks really amazing, right? Because they're just doing that direct comparison. So I remember thinking to myself, if I go first and I crush it and I do super well, maybe it'll make everyone look a little less good because everyone else is way smarter than me. They're way more talented than me. They have way more resources than me. Like, this is like my chance to like stand out because they have no other impression, right? And so that's what I did. I signed up for the first spot. I think it was like 2:30 right after school was done. And to my surprise, I ended up getting the male speaking spot at my graduation. And here I was, fast forward a few months, I'm sitting on stage with like the assistant principal, the administration, like people that like suspended me, like put me in detention. Like I'm sitting on stage with them, completely out of my element, right? I have all these like papers in hand, I'm like shaking, super nervous. And I was 17 years old at that time, and my parents were sitting in the stands. And I remember thinking, man, if I can just pull this together, if I can just read, just go up and read, like I don't even need to like make eye contact with anybody, right? And maybe this will make them a little more proud. Maybe this will make them see that they didn't waste their energy and efforts in developing someone who was arrested a year ago. And it's so funny that that I get a chance to be here talking with you guys today, because my first speech that I ever did, I was 17 years old. It was at Constitutional Hall in Washington, D.C. It was in front of 4,000 people. I was scared out of my mind, so nervous. And I remember, the standing ovation, the clapping, people were like crying, all this kind of stuff. And I remember that moment. That was like a change maker moment. I thought back, and ever since then, I've been on this search of figuring out what happened back at that restaurant. What happened that made me sit there and think I can become smarter, I can become better, I can do better, I could become, the person that I've been dying to be. The person that I don't even know what it is, I don't even have the vocabulary to put it there, but I could step into that. And today we're going to talk about some of those principles. But this search has led me to start a top-rated podcast called the Inner Changemaker. Some of you might have heard it, seen it in the last few days, as Claire has talked about it. And the Inner Changemaker, if you listen to any of the episodes, I always ask people, we've had millionaires on, we've had billionaires on, we've had Olympians, New York bestsellers, some of the most successful CEOs. I've interviewed them on the podcast. And I've always asked them, hey, what's your definition of a change maker? I said, what's the definition? Because when I started my brand, I didn't know what it was. I didn't have the courage to say, this is the definition, right? I didn't have the know-how, the knowledge, the wisdom to say, hey, this is what I'm going to stand for. I was just willing to start. And a few months ago, looking back to what happened back at the restaurant, looking back at what's been happening with the podcast and all the amazing answers that I've accumulated, I figured out what a change maker is. Are you guys curious to know? Yeah. A change maker is someone that is not focused on changing the world. They're not. Maybe that's a long-term goal, maybe that's a vision, But they don't start there. They don't worry about changing the world. They don't worry about someone building a statue for them. They don't worry about the legacy immediately. What they worry about is what's right in front of them. So you have to look back in your life. Think about who's important in your life. Think about your parents, brothers and sisters, boyfriend and girlfriend, your friends, your homies, your inner circle, whatever you want to call it. How can you be a better leader? How can you be a better change maker, a better human being, so you can change their world? That's what the best and the greatest leaders do. They focus on working and changing the people closest around them. Not to change them, but to change a perspective, to inspire, to instruct. And that's what the message of the Inner Changemaker is all about. That whole process of wanting to change the world really begins with you wanting to change people around you, their world.